Hello and welcome back to my How to Start a Megabase series. Today we're going to visit Gleba for the first time because we want to get access to legendary stack inserters. As you have seen in previous episodes, we are in many designs struggling to maintain high throughput due to only having normal quality stack inserters. And today we're going to change this with this design here. It's basically a simple upcycler, but since it has to be built on Gleba, there are some intricacies that need to be understood. Let's first look at its output. If you build the design as it is shown here with legendary assembling machines and legendary inserters, you can expect an average production of 105 legendary stack inserters per hour. If you build it with normal quality items instead, you will get an average of 39 legendary stack inserters per hour. However, both builds assume that you do have access to 20 legendary quality modules. Remember that I showed you how to get legendary quality modules in my very first video, so in theory you could build this stack inserter upcycler as your second build, completely independent of everything else. This could make some sense because legendary inserters are extremely valuable, so having an early stockpile would definitely pay off. But now let's get to the build and talk about the input requirements. If we take a look at the recipe for stack inserters, we can see that it not only requires 2 Gleba specific ingredients with carbon fiber and jelly, but also 2 rather expensive ingredients with blue chips and bulk inserters. So as a first step, we have to think about how to get these ingredients in high enough numbers to maintain a continuous upcycling process. Remember my rule of thumb for EMP-based quality upcyclers? You get roughly the same amount of legendary items per hour as you produce normal quality ones per minute. Stack inserters, however, can only be produced in assembling machines, which do not have an embedded 50% productivity bonus. This drastically reduces the amount of legendary items we get to 1/3. So this legendary assembling machine will produce 300 stack inserters per minute, and my 10-hour benchmark measured an hourly production of 105 legendary ones per hour, which is roughly 1/3 of 300. And we can also check the numbers for a normal quality assembling machine. It produces 120 stack inserters per minute, which resulted in 39 legendary ones per hour, which is also roughly 1/3. So in order to produce any reasonable amount of legendary stack inserters, we need to be able to provide the required inputs continuously, at least if we want to get those inserters quickly. From now on, I will focus on the legendary variant of this build, so you would have to downscale the numbers accordingly if you build the normal quality variant. This is the 10-hour production graph of the build. Since we get some of the inputs back from recycling, we can subtract the production rates here on the left side from the consumption rates on the right side to get the actual net consumption rates. As you can see, the amount of material is quite large. And, at least in my playthroughs, Gleba would still run on a very limited planetary starter base. So it's very unlikely to have it run at 100% capacity from the very beginning. Some of the ingredients just take some time and effort to scale up, especially if you want to avoid breaking Gleba as a whole. You will need to patiently and slowly increase the number of fruits harvested for both jelly and carbon fiber. But let's still take a closer look at the bulk inserters, of which we need 4.3 per second. Here are 3 legendary assembling machines for all 3 inserters that we need to produce. Their internal ratio is 1:1:1, so we can direct insert from machine to machine. And one assembling machine can produce 6.25 per second, which is already more than we need. With the rate calculator mod, I can enter a fractional number here and try to narrow it down until I get to the desired output. After some adjustments, I land on a factor of 0.688 that will yield 4.3 bulk inserters per second. Now I can see the actual input requirements. As you can see from these numbers, green bulk inserters are very resource hungry and will probably require some upscaling of your local bacteria breeding. Anyway, let me show you a simple design that will produce them. Let's first place the assembling machine for the bulk inserters and place a foundry for the gears here and an EMP for the green circuits here to direct insert both. One legendary bulk inserter can transfer 90 items per second, so we don't need more than that. We also need a speed beacon, which I place here. Now I can add a foundry for the copper cables here and another one for iron plates here. They direct insert into the EMP. Let me also bring in molten metal from down here so the foundries start to produce. And lastly, I add an EMP for red circuits here. I can direct insert the copper cables, but not the green circuits. So I output them here and use a belt to bring them over. We also need a few plastic bars for the red circuits, which I request here via robots. The red circuits have to be provided to the assembler as well, but that can easily be done with another underground belt. The last missing input is blue inserters, which in turn requires yellow inserters. If I place the assembling machines around the corner like this, I can direct insert the green circuits into either machine. I only need to belt the iron plates and gears to the assemblers. The green bulk inserters are now being produced and can be put on a belt. For the actual stack inserter build, I will assume that you have jelly on a central bus or at least on a belt. The same goes for bulk inserters, blue circuits and carbon fiber. So let's bring all 4 resources down to where we want to build the design. I place 5 assembling machines for all 5 different qualities of stack inserters. Although only the first assembling machine needs to be a legendary one, I will use legendary machines for all of them. Same is true for inserters. Remember, our final goal is to have legendary everything, which also includes non-essential entities. I simply don't want to carry around both normal and legendary quality items in my inventory. But if you're still short on legendary items, you can of course revert to normal quality where speed doesn't matter. This first assembler will need 50 jelly per second, so let's use 2 inserters just to be safe. Since jelly is a spoilable item, I don't recommend using buffer chests for this. But all the other ingredients will be provided with a buffer chest here. The buffer chest needs to be filled from both our fresh input lanes here as well as from the return belt of the recycler. So let's add a belt here and filter out normal quality items to the buffer chest. In order for this inserter to be fast enough, I will use the read belt contents hold and set filters circuit trick. This will massively increase the pickup speed because this prevents the inserter from waiting for more items to arrive on the belt. And since we're dealing with one spoilable ingredient, namely jelly, I add an active provider chest here to get rid of any spoiled items in the assembler. For the outputs, I add an inserter on this side and a belt to bring the items up. I also add a memory cell to keep track of what has been produced. And since I don't want to output any spoilage onto the belt, I set a filter on the inserter. Let's now filter out any legendary inserters here and add a storage chest. Any other qualities continue along this belt, to where I add a legendary recycling machine. The stack inserters arrive on the belt at such a high rate that I also need to use the read belt contents and set filters method here. Otherwise the belt would back up. Luckily, one recycler is fast enough, but it will output so much material that we need to be a bit smart about the handling. First, let's have the recycler output directly into a chest. As a first step, I will use 2 legendary bulk inserters to split normal from higher quality items. All normal quality items go up into another chest and all higher quality items go down, also into another chest. I then add a stack inserter for the normal quality jelly at the top to bring it back to the bus. Any other normal quality items need to go back into the buffer chest. This is what this stack inserter is for. I use a constant combinator to have it output full stacks of 16 items only. This is the combinator's configuration. Each item I want to stack is provided here with a logistic group multiplier of -15. And since I don't want this inserter to ever touch the jelly, I add jelly with a value of 1m, which is 1 million, so it will be multiplied to -15 million. Although it might never happen, I will add spoilage to the combinator as well. The spoilage will then be transported into the buffer chest to be then disposed into the active provider chest with another inserter. I connect the constant combinator with a green wire to this stack inserter and then use a red wire to connect it to the chest and configure it to set filters. And that's the normal quality done. As for the higher quality items, a single stack inserter is fast enough. But I also connect it to its chest and enable the set filters option to compress the items as much as possible while not getting stuck. And finally, I use an upgrade planner to upgrade the stack inserter to legendary quality. Otherwise, it will just not be fast enough. The upgrade request cannot be fulfilled just yet, but it will automatically be completed once our very first legendary inserter is produced. Now we are done with the first assembling machine. And since I used the any quality filter in the inserters, I can simply copy this 4 more times for all the other assembling machines as well. But since the other buffer chests will also contain higher quality jelly, I enable the spoiled first priority setting on the input inserters. And finally, I add a few more filter splitters to route the different quality items accordingly. Now let's take the upcycler into operation by providing fresh materials from the input belts. I add 3 perpendicular belts here, wire them to the buffer chest and define thresholds of 100 carbon fiber, blue chips and bulk inserters that will enable the belts. Then I connect the belts and the upcycler starts working. It's now only a matter of time until we get our first legendary stack inserters. And lastly, I want to stop the upcycler once I have enough legendary stack inserters. But since jelly is a spoilable ingredient, I want to implement the hibernation mechanism a little differently this time. But let's first do it the normal way, and then I'll explain what problems come with that. I add a decider combinator here and connect it to the storage chest for legendary stack inserters. The condition is legendary stack inserters less than 400, and for the output signal I choose the bell signal. I wire the output to the inserters for the jelly and configure them to be only active if they receive this bell signal. Now the upcycler will pause once we have at least 400 legendary stack inserters. Let's simulate this by putting 400 of those into the chest. The inserters stop and the remaining jelly will slowly spoil, not only in this first assembling machine, but also in all subsequent ones. But here's the catch: if I remove even a single inserter, the whole upcycler will fire up again, only to go back to sleep just a few moments later. Every time this happens, more jelly of different qualities enters the production line, where it eventually spoils. And this will accumulate more and more non-spoilable items over time until the buffer chests are full and everything deadlocks. Instead, I recommend using a technique called latching. A latch is a simple memory circuit that allows us to define 2 separate thresholds. One to start the upcycler and another one to stop it again. In our case, I want to start production if we drop below 400 legendary stack inserters, but I want to stop it only if the stockpile reaches 1000. Luckily, this is extremely simple to configure. First, I connect the combinator to itself so it receives its own output as input. Then I add a second condition to the combinator, or the number of legendary stack inserters is less than 1000. This of course does not make sense yet, so I refine the second condition, and the bell signal is equal to 1. Now let's simulate it so we can see how and why it works. Let me add 1000 inserters into the chest. Now both conditions are false and the upcycler stops. If I now remove some inserters, it still doesn't restart. Although one part of the second condition is true, we still don't have our bell signal. But if I remove even more inserters and the number of items in the chest drops below 400, the upcycler will fire up again, because the first condition becomes true. This also makes the second condition true because we now have a bell signal. Let me add 100 inserters back into the chest. Although the first condition has become false, the second one remains true. We have fewer than 1000 inserters and we have the bell signal. Now the upcycler will continue to run until we again have at least 1000 legendary inserters. And what's the benefit? Once we reach our upper threshold of 1000 inserters, the upcycler will pause for many in-game hours until we have used or exported enough stack inserters to drop below 400 again. This greatly reduces preventable spoilage and helps keep the buffer chests balanced. I highly recommend using these latches for all upcyclers that require spoilable ingredients. And that's today's design done. We now have access to legendary stack inserters, which will enable us to achieve high throughput in the designs that will follow in future videos. You can find the blueprint of the designs in the video description. If you like this content, please leave a like and hit subscribe. Thanks and bye.